Well, what's going on, Facebook family and YouTube
Brother.
family? It is yours truly, Joe Dupree, in the building from 100BLK, the Black Station at www.100blk.com. It is Wednesday, another Wellness Wednesday, even though when we really want to talk wellness, got my brother Edward J. Brown in the building. Some weather is not making things
What?
very well all over the nation. So if you somewhere like my brother Brown is,
Yes,
or where I'm
sir.
at, the weather isn't bad here, but I heard around his neck of the woods, around Natchez and Alcorn, you got to be
Yeah.
careful. So definitely this is a good night to be inside and maybe catch this video podcast and what we're talking about on this Wellness Wednesday.
What's going
Brother
on,
Edward,
brother?
how you doing, my friend?
I'm good, man. I'm dry right now, and we got lights, so
Okay.
I'm glad to be here. What's going on with you?
Hey, man, it's another day. It's another day. I'm blessed to see it, man. With everything going on, with what I'm not absolutely sure about that just occurred in New York City in the subway. I don't
Yes,
know, did that man had a mental episode or was
yes.
he? I don't know really what was going on, but tragically, let's also talk about all the victims, especially those who were the ones who suffered. And luckily, nobody died, but there was multiple folks that were. Did anybody die? Did-
I'm not sure, man.
I,
Details are still coming in, and
right.
the last I heard was they finally caught up with him and arrested him.
Right. And supposedly he called and told on himself.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So,
mental health is real.
it kind of makes me think about, last night. It's amazing, brother Dupree. We do these podcasts, and people are coming up to me, and people are beginning to say, "Man, I watched the podcast last week, and this is what I
Okay.
felt. This is what I thought." And so one of the young ladies last night asked me, "What are you going to talk about tomorrow?" And there was 3 or 4 of them in the class at the time, and I said, "Well, I think we're going to talk about love tomorrow."
Mm,
And their ears all stood up. So it shows you how God always has a way of speaking. And I got a different vibe. I said, you know what we're gonna talk about? We're gonna talk about fear.
mm.
Now, Brother Dupree, for some of us, those two go hand in hand.
Come on. Come on.
Because I know some brothers that would rather have a root canal with no anesthesia than be in love.
Right.
They
Right.
can start talking about all of their feelings and all that mushy stuff inside.
Right.
So, you bringing up what happened in New York City, and when we start talking about mass shootings and we start talking about all this terrorism and stuff that's going on, fear is a debilitating emotion at times.
It is. It is. It
And
is.
it's something that I think would be a perfect issue topic for us to talk about, because here's something that I learned many years ago working on my master's. Do
Okay.
you know what is the one thing that is the biggest fear of people on this planet? It's
Talk
not
to me.
arachnophobia, which is fear of spiders. It's
Right.
not fear of heights. It's just the fear of failing.
A failure.
Fear
Wow.
of failing is the number one fear
Mm.
of humans.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
look, before we get into this fear and talking about
Mm-hmm.
what we're going to call it tonight, the fear factor, uh
Mm-hmm.
let us definitely let folks know that you can tell a friend to tell a friend, share this with a friend. We are in the building. Also, this is the weekend before Easter. And
That's
family,
right.
let's just be very honest. The holidays are not happy for everybody. It is times like this people are dealing with reminiscing over the loss of loved ones who will not be with them for the first time during this Easter celebration, this resurrection celebration. Um,
Absolutely.
and you know, it's times like this you need to be cognizant that folks need to have somebody to talk to because your mental health matters. And we always say it here on Wellness Wednesday: a healthy you is a
It's
better
a better
you.
you. That's
So
right.
Brother
That's right.
Brown, the floor is all yours, man. Let's get into the fear
Well,
factor.
and when we talk about the concept of fear, and what I said a few seconds ago is that fear can be a debilitating emotion. Fear can be so powerful of a factor that it will prevent folks from doing things that they need to do. One of the reasons people don't reach out for mental health services is because of fear. What will people think? What will happen when I go to counseling? Are they going to make me get in touch with things I don't want to get in touch with? Are they going
Mm,
to make me talk about things I don't want to talk about? Fear is one of the major driving forces on why people do not take on certain endeavors in their life,
mm,
why we don't do certain things. I always love to talk to my non-traditional students. And what I mean by that is that students above the age of 30 and they may be freshmen or sophomores in college. And I ask them, why didn't you come to college sooner? And most of them will say, well, there were things that happened in the life cycle. I had a child, I got married, or I started my career or whatever. But most of them said it was the unknown. I didn't know what to expect. I was afraid. So I put it off. If we don't start to look at the impact of fear on our lives, it will continue to run rampant and keep us from being the best us that we can be.
correct.
So now when we start looking at fear, what actually is it? What can we define fear as? Fear is an unsettling, a disarray of emotions regarding a particular variable,
Mm,
be it relationships, be it employment, like I spoke about a few seconds ago. Failure, the fear of
wow.
failure. So I know what'll keep me from failing. I won't even try.
Mm,
Therefore, I know I won't fail, and therefore I don't have to be afraid.
wow.
Yeah, I don't have to try, and if I don't do it, now, Brother Dupree, this is where we really come home with you and I. You remember we talked about going to the doctor?
Correct.
Why do most people not go to the doctor?
Well, the
Because
fear of
I'd rather
bad news. The fear that
I'd
they
rather
might get
not
that
know.
bad news.
I don't want any bad news. So
Right.
I'd rather not know.
Right.
And therefore, by the time you find out, treatment may not be an option.
Correct.
So the fear of knowing, the fear of bad news is that thing that keeps us from doing what we need to do.
Yeah,
You know,
it's really deep when you talk about the fear of failure because so many of us are impulsive creatures, and that's how nobody wants to be a failure to themselves, to their children,
no.
to their mothers and their fathers, to their siblings, to the other family members, be it aunts or uncles, to friends, to people who know them. Nobody wants to fail. We are highly competitive, and none of us want to be seen as losers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So think about it in so many different arenas of our life. We started talking about fear. Well, we said we were going to talk about love, and then this concept of fear. And look at this. Every time I get in a relationship, I get hurt.
Right.
So I don't want to get hurt. Therefore, I don't want to fail. So what I'm going to do is I'm not even going to try to make this successful. So
Right.
sometimes we self-sabotage.
Mm,
I'm going to hurt you before you hurt me.
mm.
Therefore, I don't have to fail. I did it on my own. I intentionally did it. We have people who do that in so many situations in their lives with relationships, parenting, we try, we really try to be the best parents we can be. Do we do everything right? Nope.
Hmm.
But we give our all. And when our all is not enough, we feel some type of way, like you just talked about, that failure. No, 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 no. We have to look at different way. We have to reframe it, as we call it, and look at it differently. Parenting is one of those things you can not do and be successful.
Correct.
I've known people who've taken on the responsibility of raising nieces, nephews. One of the things we talked about in one of our podcasts is how the generation that we're in now, the grandparents are raising the kid, their grandkids. We have, thank God, a generation that got over the fear and said, listen, this has to be done. I cannot be afraid and not do it, so I'm going to pick up the charge. Therefore, we see the family dynamics in the African American community still progressing and still growing, and children are still being successful. But what happens when we have other aspects of our lives where we do not pick up the charge because we're afraid? I'm going to share something with myself. With my father, I remember being a young kid, and my mother would get me ready for church every Sunday, and we would head out the door. And I would always see my dad sitting on the floor getting ready to watch some event. And one day, being 8, 9, 10 years old, I said, Dad, why you don't come to church? And my dad said, there ain't no God. I don't believe in all that foolery. So I was like, okay, all right. So as I got older and became a teenager, 15, 16, and began to develop a sense of self and awareness, I asked him one day, I said, Dad, let's say you're wrong and that there is a God and you didn't participate. You're going to come up short.
Very short.
Yeah, you're going to come up short. I said, but however, let's say there is and you participated. If it is, good. And if it's not, at least you participated. And my dad looked at me and he said, well, I don't want to be afraid of failing, so I ain't even going to get involved in it.
Wow. The fear,
Yeah.
the fear of failure.
The fear of failure.
I have a good friend named Corey Jack, and he does a lot of speaking and does a lot with business engagement and business to business type talks. And he always says death to comfort zones, you know, and it's hard because many of us don't want to take the challenge. Many of us don't want to go into the unknown. Many of us don't want to we want to stay within the norms. We want to stay within what we know is safe, what is
we want to
safe.
stay safe. Yeah.
Right.
So why do we allow fear to control our actions to the point where we don't do things we know we really should do? Going to the doctor, being that individual. Now, let's really get into the meat of the matter, Brother Dupree.
Come on.
For men, being vulnerable, putting your emotional state on the line, being that dad that shows your son it's okay to cry, being that dad that allows your daughter to see what a man should be.
Right.
All of this stuff is non-safe areas for men because it calls for us to draw upon emotions. It calls for us to draw upon feelings. That we don't like feelings. You could run inside and your ear really fell off and stop that crying. Just put some duct tape on it and go back outside. You'll be good. Boys don't cry. Stop that foolishness. Go back outside. So now here we are That emotion is not that thing that we want to participate in. So what do? We bury it way down in our gut where we're safe that it never has to come up and we never have to be vulnerable.
Correct.
So now it comes time to where the woman wants to know emotionally how we feel.
Mm.
How do you feel? Oh, I feel like I want to watch the game. No, I mean about this relationship. Oh, why we got to talk about how I feel about this game? I just want to know. I don't want to talk about feelings because I don't like feelings because it makes me look weak and soft. Or it could possibly be that thing in the conversation that will make me not win. I'll be a failure.
Correct. Correct.
If my emotions are not up to par with your emotions, am I a failure? Am I falling short? Now, we were going to talk about love. We were going to talk about everybody has a different definition of what love is. Fear is the same way. Everyone has a different definition of fear. Al Capone had a quote. Al Capone said, lying is the result of fear of something. You don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. You don't want to deal with the consequences of something, so you lie. I ain't scared of nothing, so I don't lie. That was Al Capone's quote. We as people, as humans, we have this big emotional bundle of fear. We all have it. Some of us ignore it. Some of us suppress it. Some of us allow it to drive us above all other emotions.
Wow.
So where do you go when your fear is so great that it prevents you from being a better you? Where do you go? What do you
Wow.
do?
So the answer is
As you sip your tea, listen,
mm-hmm.
here's the answer. Once you get to a certain point in the life cycle, Brother Dupree, none of the things that present itself in your life are new. They're just reframed.
Wow.
You've dealt with fear before.
Correct.
You've dealt with since you was a child.
Correct.
You dealt with rejection since you was a child. You dealt with disappointment since you were a child. As you go through the life cycle, the experiences are the same. They're just reframed. As they say, they're rewrapped in new
Right.
wrapping.
There's nothing new under the sun.
There's that. And what helps you deal with fear is the knowledge that I've come through this before.
Mm.
All right. So you asked, there it is. How
So
do
so
we
so
go
we
ahead?
can even look at it from the perspective of what happened this weekend. You know, one of the biggest sporting events known to man occurred this weekend, the Masters. And even though the individual that most of us love, especially people of color when it comes down to golf, is Tiger Woods. And Tiger, after what Tiger had went through, had to overcome the fear of, am I
Yes.
able to
Am I going
play
to be able to perform?
right, to perform? Am I physically up to the challenge? And really wasn't his physical up to the challenge, was he mentally at
Correct.
a place where because his mental would tell his body to keep going when his body would say, I can't go no further.
Yeah. You know, and that's some of that stuff that goes along with the life cycle. Like for example, this weekend was the blue and gold game for the Jags.
Right.
So the Friday before, they had former players can come back.
Mm-hmm.
So I happened to look at the picture and I didn't see anybody. Try to understand this. I didn't see anybody in the picture that played for Southern before the 2000s.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Because when you think about it, if you played for Southern in 2001, that's 21 years ago.
Correct.
So imagine a old joker like me who went to Southern in 1983.
Come on.
You see what I'm saying? But here's the interesting thing. I looked at the pictures and I looked at a lot of those guys who played in 2015, 2018, 2013. Those cats look like they can still play.
Mm-hmm.
Why did the guys who played in the 19s don't show up for that event? I ain't about to go in there and be no old man on that. Well, but you are old man.
Right, right.
The knowledge of I'm way beyond my prime prevented folks from showing up.
Correct.
It prevent folks from going. How many of us watching this podcast, listening to this, have not done things out of fear?
You're correct. Correct. Like you said, it could be anything from the fear of failure, uh,
Failure.
the fear of not being accepted, the fear that people will look at me as if I'm different. I don't belong here. This is not where I need to be. You know, there's so many fears. Wow, there's just so many things that can make you say, man, why would I do this? It's not going to turn out right.
Yeah, well, when you say not turn out right, I had a young lady tell me she's currently married, and she was a former student. She's currently married, and we were all talking about in the hallway. Me and some of the other instructors, we were talking about the fear of students not wanting to give their best because they're afraid their best may not be good enough, whatever. And she said, I remember the guy that I really believe I should have married. And one of the other instructors looked and said, where'd that come from? That's not what we're talking about. She said, well, where it came from was I didn't marry him because I was afraid what people were going to say because he didn't look like the guy that I should marry. And I had to be me. I said, what do you mean he didn't look like? Well, he was short and kind of, not very attractive, but he treated me better than any guy ever treated me in my life. And I didn't marry him because I didn't want people to say, y'all just don't look like y'all belong together.
Mm.
Now, I could see on some of the other instructors' faces, because we was in one of their offices, they all kind of had that look like, that's crazy. But how powerful was, as you just said, her fear of not being accepted?
Correct.
It was to the point where she passed up on what she felt was her soulmate. So now we have women today who are not going into motherhood because they don't want to deal with the pain of childbirth.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, I mean, just so many fears you could talk about. I mean, this is a subject that we could go from so many different angles. Think about this right now. The fear of going into an occupation that you may have a passion for because you may be fearful of what people say because you choosing this occupation to be your occupation. You might be passionate about public safety, law enforcement, but because of your fear of what people will say if you decide to be a law enforcement officer with the climate of law enforcement officers these days might prevent you from your purpose. You might literally talk yourself out of your place of purpose and prosperity because of fear.
Yeah. And again, remember what we said. We've been in front of fear and we faced fear before. I tell a lot of my students, fear and anxiety of the exam, 10 times out of 10 is worse than the exam itself. You done stressed and you done got all beside yourself because you're worried about this exam. And then when you take the exam, you say it wasn't that bad. Yeah. Because you've been preparing for the exam for the past 3 weeks. We have to get to the point where we cannot deny that fear exists. You have to look at it and say, okay, I'm afraid right now. So what am I going to do? What are you afraid of? And you prepare for that. If you're afraid of failure, then prepare. Put more effort into preparation.
Correct.
If you're afraid of being hurt in a relationship, put more effort into commitment to being the best you can be. If you're afraid, because what's happening right now, we are living in, and I was going to wait for the second half of the hour, but here we are at the second half. We have been living with fear, extreme fear, for the past 2 years.
Come on.
COVID has changed the whole concept of fear.
Correct. Correct.
Never did we ever believe we were going to have to be afraid of breathing.
Or being close to someone that you love.
Shaking someone's hand.
Right. Right.
I had my class laughing the other day. I said, if you don't think COVID has people afraid, go somewhere and let somebody cough. Let them cough twice. The whole room turned and looked like this.
Mm-hmm.
We are deathly afraid of COVID and how it's killed over 1 million people.
Correct.
Just in this country.
Correct.
So if you say, oh, I'm not afraid of nothing, that's not true. You wore a mask.
Very much so.
Quarantined in your house for almost a year.
Very much so.
So now here we are back outside, as Jada Kiss says. We outside. We're back outside. There are preparations and precautions that we had to take just to alleviate our fear of interacting.
Correct. Correct.
You know, I was in the supermarket the other night, and I noticed a lot of people are not wearing masks again. I walked past this older lady, and she went, and I immediately stopped with my basket, and I turned and I looked, and I noticed the 2 or 3 people in front of me had done the same thing. Because the 3 of us had on masks.
Right.
She did not.
Right.
And she's walking down the aisle just a coughing. Now, would we have been wrong to say, now see, you need to have a mask on above all of us? The anxiety in the room immediately went up. I remember the first time I flew during COVID. I just kept saying, there's this circulation of air in this
right. Right. Right.
We all breathing the same air.
Right.
On this plane. COVID introduced a new level of fear for us as a society.
Indeed it did. I mean, but like you said, we respond to our fearfulness of whatever is at the end of this thing. Like for example, we can go back to the prior video podcast that we did last week, where we talked about the slap being heard around the world. Mm-hmm. And you know, and that was either last week or week before last, I forget. But nevertheless, you know, it's the fearfulness of how will people look at me because something was said about me that people were like, he's soft, like I told you. You know, the fearful, you know, we are very much fearful of how other people view us. And we want to be viewed with respect. We want to be viewed as not a pushover. We want to be reviewed as people of strength, not weakness.
Having it all together. We gonna have. I got it all together.
I mean, you can even think about our former president, president before the president that is in office right now. He many a time, I believe, said things that he said because he had a fear of not being popular. You know, he wanted everybody to be on his train, everybody to be down with him because he was the man. You know, that's how you got close to him. If you wanted this man really to listen to you, begin to compliment him, make him not feel fearful that you didn't like him.
We we are looking at, like yesterday with the gentleman in New York City.
Right.
We are now at the point with COVID where we are able to start to go out, and you take precautions, still wear masks. I still carry sanitizer in my pocket,
Correct.
and we're at the point where we're like, okay, now in addition to COVID, I got to start looking at people and wonder, does this person have a gun?
Right.
Does this person have a smoke bomb?
Right.
What if we allow fear to take over? We will no longer be the society that we are.
Correct.
There'll be no more Pelicans games, no more Saints games, no more concerts, because we will not only be afraid of COVID, but now we're afraid of these mass shooters.
Right. Right.
Our children going to school. I had a lady tell me that there was an active shooter at her child's school, and she's never been so afraid in her life. She said, I couldn't get there fast enough. School. At school. You have that coworker.
Right.
You don't want to say certain things to the coworker. They always kind of seem to be peculiar to you.
Correct.
We have to acknowledge that we all possess this fear and embrace it and come up with active coping skills in order for us to function normally in life. That is the purpose of this podcast today, to understand that fear is a normal reaction. But we have to develop coping skills in order to function normally within the boundaries of normal fear. For example, sanitizer.
Right.
Mask.
Right.
To be able to go to the doctor to make sure that we're healthy.
Correct.
And I remember one of my favorite shows we did where we talked about people's right to be vaccinated or not vaccinated.
Correct.
You have the right to not be vaccinated, but you also don't have the right to kill me.
Right.
You don't have the right to infect me because you don't want to be vaccinated.
Correct. I mean, the thing about it is, we really have to start really asking ourselves the hard questions. And the hard question is, with everything that's going on, war in Ukraine that could spread out to be a war in Europe that could turn into the next world war.
Exactly.
With what we have to deal with just seeing the appointment of the first woman of color, not the first woman of color, the first African American woman, a black woman being appointed to the Supreme Court, but seeing how individuals who were not of her same race handled her during the questioning. That could put a fear in you. I give you a prime example. This is going, and I'm glad you're talking about this. I was glad, and I didn't even know we were going to talk about it. I went to an event last night for a very good friend of mine, someone that I could honestly see myself in business with, or working for, or working with. He is not African American, but he's a very good friend of mine. He is about to run for public office. And I was surrounded by a lot of folks who were very conservative and didn't look like me.
Mm-hmm.
And I could tell they felt a little strange around me, and I definitely felt a little strange around them. And it was funny. I could really say that it wasn't a fear, but it was just a feeling of awkwardness that could have been fear. That I was like,
differences.
I'm like, half these people are looking at me as if I'm here to serve them a drink, or am I here?
Why are you here?
Why am I here?
Why are you here?
And I said, that is wild. I said, they don't know I could be, I actually had on a Southern University polo. I said they didn't know I could have been a coach.
Mm-hmm.
I could have been a professor.
You could have
I
been
could
a
have been
dean.
I could have been a distinguished alumni that worked for that could have been the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. I could have been a
Mm-hmm.
multi-millionaire, but I did not look like them. They did not know who I was, and most of them barely spoke to me. I sat at a table by myself really for about 30 minutes of the whole event until somebody a elderly man said, "Can I come and sit with you?" I said, "Yeah, of course." I said, "The table's open." And I said, "Wow,
Yeah.
this is crazy." I said, "There are people literally standing not wanting
Mm-hmm.
to sit at the table." I felt like Token on South Park. I really did. I felt like Token on South Park. I said,
Mm-hmm.
so wow, this really does happen. And then people
Yes.
ask, why do we have these race phobias or these feelings of awkwardness when we're around other people from other races? Because I really laughed in there. I said, I'm it's not that I'm in a different social economic group.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
But it was amazing to me.
Strictly because of race.
Bam,
Yeah.
bam.
And when we go back and let's look at the origin of slavery and segregation, and it was embedded in fear. White people don't want to admit it, but they did not know anything about black people. We were brought here from a different country. We spoke a different language.
Mm-hmm.
We were different. So they did not know. They had no idea, no concept of what we were, other than a product or labor. And that fear has transcended hundreds and hundreds of years because it still exists. One of the most profound things to ever happen to me, Brother Dupree, was years and years ago. One of the first times I went to Vegas, I got on the elevator, and there was this elderly white woman at the casino, and she was on the elevator, and when I got on, it was just the two of us. And you know how you do with the Southern thing, you kind of nod, like
Mm-hmm. Correct.
push the button.
Correct.
And then I looked at her, and she moved her purse from one side, because I was on one side, the side closest to her, she moved it to the other side and kind of just looked up at me. So I reached in my pocket and I moved my wallet to the other pocket. And it made me think, and I kind of laughed. I said, so she believes that I'm possibly a threat to whatever change she got in her pocket, in her purse. And what really made me laugh, Brother Dupree, was if I wanted to take her purse, what could she do? Moving it to the other arm was gonna stop me. You know, moving her purse to the other arm was gonna prevent me from getting it. But the concept of what had to be going through her head, she felt there was some type of threat. And she did not know me from Adam.
Right.
All she knew was that I was a black man. When we start looking at people's fear, it makes us react. Trayvon Martin, Zimmerman stepped to Trayvon, and when Trayvon put the two-piece and the biscuit on him,
Mm.
he realized at that moment he was afraid, and he shot that kid. He shot him because he was afraid. Fear will make us react and do things that are totally, totally dangerous to the people around us.
Correct. Correct. And hold it. And let's just talk about that because embedded in the fabric of many things that people don't want to talk about is to be very truthful about it. How individuals there have been many people of color who have suffered at the hands of police brutality,
Mhm.
injustices of all manners and all types, because folks were fearful of
Mhm.
them just because of who they were. And that's
And they're great.
saddening. That's sad. Think about it. Think about this. Tamir Rice. Tamir Rice. Tamir Rice, because he was an African American child with a plastic gun, was perceived as a threat because of fear. Because you're not going to shoot a child with a plastic gun thinking that the plastic gun was a real gun, unless you were fearful that that child uh, was going to do something heinous with the item that they had in their hand that you perceived was real when it was just really a toy. And sometimes, I hate to say it, the fear because of the social economic environment, or the part of the city or the town, or the place, is considered to be subpar, the hood, quote unquote. Because
Mhm.
I promise you, a kid playing in a predominant part of town of another race, with a plastic gun, is not going to have the police run up on them and consider them as a threat. That's just a child playing with a plastic gun. But Tamir
Mhm.
Rice, because of the area of town, because of the color of his skin, was perceived because of fear as a threat
Of
as a
fear.
child, and lost
Mhm.
his life.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly. And the sad thing about it, Brother Dupree, we're talking about fear, right? And
right,
one of the things we're saying is develop the skill, acknowledge fear, understand it's real, it's a part of the life cycle, and develop the coping skills necessary to deal with your fear, right?
right,
Law enforcement, what law enforcement does, or what's supposed to happen, in order to deal with their fear, they're trained. There is supposed to be adequate training that's supposed to kick in when fear, anxiety, and emotions kick in. Your training is supposed to supersede that, but it does not. Because I believe, and I am going to get on my soapbox for 10 seconds, I do not believe law enforcement puts enough weight on these psychological evaluations that these officers go to prior to being hired.
mm,
It's just something that they got to do. I think if they started to put more effort into it and give it more credibility and more weight, a lot of officers would not be officers because there's some unresolved emotional issues that causes them in their emotional state to supersede their training instead of their training supersede their emotional state of mind.
well, I will say this, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I believe any individual, I don't care what job this individual has, but any individual that is legally, has the legal boundaries of the law backing them, that they can by law take life,
Mm,
need to be at least once a year mentally
absolutely.
evaluated to make sure that they are still in a place where they can make a rational decision, should that
Absolutely.
decision have to be made to protect life, and to preserve life. And I even agree with that with the military. I think individuals who
Absolutely.
are empowered by the laws and the constitution of this nation. To be exact, let me even go further and make some people real mad, who are my good friends from the NRA. I believe anybody who can bear arms, if you can bear arms and arms can take lives, you need to have some type of psychological evaluation that says you're capable of bearing these arms to protect life, not just to take it.
Mhm. I
I,
agree.
that's just my feeling.
I believe we need to put more, and again, we started talking about fear, and we talked about how do you deal with it, how do you cope with it. One, you acknowledge that it's real, you acknowledge the effect that it has on you, and you work on developing the coping skills to help you address it and address it positively, right?
Right.
When we look at law enforcement and we look at military and individuals who, like you said, weaponry is a part of their job, we should pay attention to how the anxiety and the stress of danger, and here's something else, and you just talked about that, the authority that's given to certain people, how it changes the individual that they are. Some people change because they're afraid and the fear is overbearing, and being a law enforcement officer over the years have changed who they are. Some people get that King Kong syndrome as well.
Right.
Where, the power, total power totally corrupts.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to see them, I've watched so many videos of law enforcement, and I've even worked with law enforcement, and I want to give a shout out to, the law enforcement from Lafayette who embrace positive choices and allow us to do training and, committed to the relationship. But I've seen law enforcement tell me, just shut up. Well, wait a minute. Just because you're law enforcement does not mean you don't have to be polite and respectful.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying? And
Correct.
to sit there and tell another grown individual to shut up, well, wait a minute. And the authority that's given to them makes them believe they have authority over you as a human being and not authority within a situation.
Correct.
When you walk up, Dupree, you may have authority over that situation, but you don't have authority over me.
Correct. Because I still have constitutional rights.
Yeah, you're a human being. I'm a human being. Correct.
Right. And I still have inalienable constitutional rights. That hold up, that was not given to me by the Constitution for say. I have rights because I'm an American citizen, but as a human being, I have certain rights that are given to me by my Creator. Right. So we've got to do better. I many a times don't want to drift too far to the left or too far to the right, but we have to do better. We have to do better as a people to realize that first of all, in this thing called fear, we're gonna have to do a show about manipulation. Because there are many folks out there that are very manipulative, and they will try to instill fear into others so that they can manipulate and maneuver to accomplish what they need to accomplish, many from the shadows. Folk are big about throwing rocks and then hiding their hands. So we definitely need to continue on this series of video blogs where we talk about with mental health and mental health awareness, because this affects you. Some people do stuff maliciously just to see can they get a kick out of you.
Correct. Absolutely. Their intent is malicious from the beginning.
Correct.
So when we start talking about the impact of fear, because we're wrapping this up tonight, we start talking about the impact of fear. It is difficult for men and some women to say, I am afraid. And once you do not accept that you're afraid, then we always say the first rule of solving a problem is you have to admit that there is a problem.
Right.
So I'm afraid. Okay, what are you afraid of? I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of being vulnerable. I'm afraid. Okay, so now that you acknowledge you're afraid, how are you going to deal with it? Well, I'm going to realize that I've been afraid before and I came through it. I've been vulnerable before and I came through it. So I'm going to work on developing the coping skills to get me through this particular part of the life cycle, this emotion called fear. But if we do not spend time talking about it like we're doing tonight, we don't spend time saying, how do we address fear? Well, I know how I address it. I just avoid it. You cannot avoid fear. There's big money in fear. Did you know that?
Yes, yes,
How many horror movies have we intentionally pay money to go sit down and be afraid?
correct. Very, very
Let's be
true.
haunted houses. What is that? The 13th Gate or whatever that is in Baton
Correct.
Rouge
In Baton Rouge, correct.
is the number one haunted house in the country. People come from California, Florida, actors and actresses to participate in 13th Gate for an entire month.
Mm-hmm.
There's big money in fear. If we do not acknowledge that something is a part of who we are, it goes untreated, it goes unaddressed, and therefore there could be negative consequences. There could
Correct.
be.
Correct.
We cannot continue to walk around and pretend something doesn't happen. It doesn't exist. Yes, we as men, we have fear. We avoid things because we don't want to fail. We avoid things because we don't want to feel. Now, there's a question that I was asked this week was, well, who who is more afraid in the life cycle, men or women? And of course, I had to be honest. Everyone is different. That's an individualized question. But we have to look at it. Fear is not a gender specific thing. Gender specific issues are pregnancy. Women can get pregnant.
Right.
Men can't.
Correct.
You know what I mean? So when we start talking about emotions, emotions are not gender specific. So I wanted today to put out there that we all suffer from fear. Fear has impacted our lives in some way, shape, or form. And we all have to look at, have we developed the necessary skills to address when we are afraid? In other words, do we not avoid it and do we conquer it? I want everybody that watched this podcast to be able to conquer their fears, to be able to develop the necessary skills needed to overcome the things that they're afraid of. People and a lot of men that I've been in had the privilege of knowing or said, you remember when your kids were little and you stood over them when they were infants and you were like, man, I don't want anything to happen to them. The anxiety starts at birth of trying to protect them from things that they're afraid of. Let's start to put in our children the coping skills, the abilities needed to address some of these things that's coming at them in their lives. And fear is one of them.
Correct.
We have to stop overindulging our children and allow them to develop the necessary skills to be productive adults. Fear is a natural part of the life cycle, and we got to have skills to address it.
Right. And we got to tell them that this will happen. You will be afraid.
Yes,
However,
especially men.
right. We got to tell them that, and we got to say, there is light at the end of the tunnel, even though at the beginning you may not see that light and you may be very afraid, but you have to keep moving forward. Once again, I used the Masters this past weekend. Tiger Woods probably could have found every reason in the world not to have played. He could have said, look, it's too soon. My body's hurting too much. But Tiger understood he had a greater responsibility not only to himself, but to his children, to his fans, to those who say, if Tiger could fight through this, who knows who watched that and said, if Tiger can do that, I can do this. Because Tiger fought through and I can fight through. And sometimes you don't know that it is what you do that somebody is watching that motivates them to keep going, even though you may not speak to that person, you may not have no communication with that person. And this is a great place that I'm telling you, if you need somebody to talk to, if you have what you feel, and let's not call it mental health issues, let's just say that you feel like you want to talk to somebody, you need somebody to listen to you, you think you have a certain philosophy, a certain way of seeing things, go to positivechoicescounseling.org. They can definitely You can call them. They can have a word with you, and a session may be necessary, because here's the thing. Once again, you said it at the beginning of this podcast. First, you got to say that there's a problem. If you don't say that there's a problem, we can't fix what you say don't exist.
Yeah. If we can't acknowledge that there is a problem, then we can't solve it.
Right.
I think that tonight was a great opportunity for us to explain something in the life cycle that we all experience. We all experience fear. We all experience the fear of failure, the fear of being hurt, you know, the fear of the unknown. Everyone has the ability to develop coping skills to deal with this fear. It's all within us. If you feel you need help, counselors are available to help you understand how fear impacts your life and what you can do to overcome that. It's all about just making a phone call. It's all about reaching out to that qualified, trained individual that can help you kind of understand this journey that you're going to need to go on. At the end of the day, being afraid is not a sign of weakness. Being afraid and not addressing it and getting help is a sign of weakness. Reach out, find someone that can help you walk that walk, someone that can help you develop those skills. And trust me, fear is something that we can conquer. Fear is something that you can overcome. The first step is being able to understand what fear is. And hopefully tonight we came a little bit closer to getting people to understand what it means to be afraid, how fear impacts us, and what we can do to kind of overcome that. I think we covered a lot of information tonight.
Definitely. And family, you can go to the website that is on your screen right now, www.the100blk.com. You can click on Community Conversations. There's a drop down box. You'll see where it says Wellness Wednesday, and you can go and view not only this video podcast, but many other video podcasts that we have put together to give you a plethora of information to help you with some mental health topics that might be what you're dealing with, a situation that you or someone you know is going through. Once again, I'm going to post it back up there. If you have any question about counseling services, about mental health, about needing someone to talk to, definitely go to positivechoicescounseling.org. They are there to help you. They have locations, and they do video consultations where, telemed. They are available no matter where you're at. They can definitely help you. We are here for this reason, because your mental health does matter. A healthy you is a better you. And like I said, as we make our way into the Easter holiday, there are folks who have lost people due to COVID. There are people who have lost folks due to unfortunate circumstances. There are people who have lost folks due to natural causes. But nevertheless, a lot of folks are going into the holiday season, and grandma might not be there no more. Grandpa might not be there no more. Mom or dad might not be there no more. A loved one, someone close or dear to them, a friend may not be there no more. And you might be going through a crisis, and you don't know who you need to talk to say, look, it's really hard for me to handle that this person isn't here no more. Go to positivechoicescounseling.org. They have counselors that can help you and help you with your issues, and you can talk it out. Once again, your mental health does matter, and a healthy you is a better you. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to my brother, Edward J. Brown. He's going to close us out for tonight. It's on you, my friend.
Hey, listen, man, we appreciate everyone that tunes in, but we would really appreciate if you utilize the information that we give every Wednesday night. We come in, we try to give good information, things that can help you develop into that individual that you want to be, that individual that you can be. And again, you can be that person that you want to be. You just got to put in the work. And tuning in to Wellness Wednesday is a good way to start. Next week, I promise, we will address the topic of love. Everybody's been asking me, when are you going to do a workshop? When are you going to do a podcast on love? We'll do it next week. Until then, man, We'll see you guys then. Peace.